By the time the trial wrapped up and the public had time to digest the strange and unsettling details of the case, the conversation began to shift from what happened to what it meant, because this wasn't to just a story about one woman's greed or one victim's tragic end. It was a case that exposed gaps in how we think about crime, how we detect it, and how we protect the vulnerable. Poison as a weapon has always fascinated criminologists, stretching back to Victorian arsenic murders and the antifreeze killings of the 20th century. But what made the Eyedrop murder stand out was the accessibility and invisibility of the weapon itself. Unlike a knife or a gun, which leave obvious marks, or even common poisons like ethylene glycol, which show up in toxicology screens more predictably, tetrahydrozoline sat in a blind spot for years, tucked away on pharmacy shelves as something designed to soothe, not kill. For investigators, this case was a wake-up call that even the most ordinary household products can be repurposed in ways the public rarely considers, and for the true crime audience, it sparked a wave of paranoia about what we ingest, who prepares it, and how easily trust can be weaponized in daily life. The prosecutors made sure to emphasize during trial that this wasn't a one-off fluke, that the pattern of symptoms Hernan exhibited leading up to her death, drowsiness, fatigue, confusion, slowed breathing, lined up almost perfectly with documented cases of tetrahydrozoline poisoning, and that had medical staff or friends recognized those warning signs earlier, intervention might have been possible. That realization sparked wider debate, because poisonings often slip under the radar, dismissed as illness or natural decline, which means cases like Hernan A.S. may not be as rare as we think. They were just harder to catch. In the aftermath, forensic science circles began discussing whether routine toxicology screenings should expand to include substances like tetrahydrozoline, a step that could save lives, but also comes with costs and complexities, since not every lab is equipped to detect obscure compounds without specific requests. And then there was the cultural impact. Media outlets and podcasts latched onto the phrase, "death by eye drops," because it was so surreal, so easy to remember, that it spread like wildfire. But behind that catchphrase was a haunting reality. A woman who trusted her caregiver, who thought she had a friend in her corner, died because that trust was exploited for money. That element of betrayal struck a chord across communities, particularly among older adults, and their families, because it highlighted the vulnerability of people who rely on others for care, whether due to age, illness, or disability. Advocacy groups began citing the Kerchevsky case as an example of elder exploitation at its most extreme, using it to push for stronger oversight, background checks, and education around financial guardianship. Even law enforcement acknowledged that part of what allowed Jessie to operate unchecked for so long was how normalized her role was. She wasn't a shadowy intruder, she was the friend, the helper, the person who seemed above suspicion. That camouflage is what made the crime so insidious, and it's also what made it resonate with the public long after the gavel came down. Because if poison is the weapon of the patient killer, trust is the cloak they wear, and in this case, Jessie wore it well until science ripped it away. The lasting question became not just, how did she do it, but how many others out there are doing something similar, hidden under the mask of caregiving, hiding their greed behind a smile. It was a thought that kept people up at night, turning a local Wisconsin tragedy into a cautionary tale with national weight, proof that sometimes the smallest bottle on the shelf can conceal the darkest intentions.